Good afternoon. On behalf of the Asian Institute of International Financial Law, AIIFL, I'd like to extend our warmest welcome for you to join AIIFL's seminar on crypto regulation and innovation. Where does the balance lie for crypto? My name is Emily Lee. I'm the director of AIIFL, which is housed at the Faculty of Law of the University of Hong Kong. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Mr. Jay Low, who will then introduce the speaker, Ms. Alexa Lam. Mr. Jay Low, he is president of Diamond Asia Capital, a multi-billion alternative asset manager. He has very rich experience in this area. And without further ado, I'll pass the floor to Mr. Low. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. Thank you, HKU, for organizing this platform, for us to have an opportunity to speak about a very timely topic, crypto regulation. I'd like to introduce my speaker, Miss Alexa Lam. I met Alexa back in 2006. Back then, I was in New York. I was in hedge fund. I was sent by my headquarters to start an office in Hong Kong. And we put in an application. I think we applied for a Type 7 because my US lawyer didn't know what it means. I met Alexa in Goldman's office in New York. Alexa says, "Oh, you are the guy who's applying for this license we designed for the money changers. What business are you trying to be in?" And that was my first interaction with Alexa. And she's been my regulator since my time at the hedge fund. And then I remember, and the next interaction with Alexa was, I think was one of the Chinese New Year Eve. We were exchanging email on a particular regulator-related issue. Alexa said, "Why don't you just come, let's have a lunch and let's discuss about it." And I was shocked because was not what I'd expected, how regulator interact with industry. And it gave me a lot of comfort since that time on how myself as an industry participant view my relationship with the regulator. In Hong Kong, we have ability to have actual dialogue with our regulator, and regulators are willing to listen to us. This is a very timely topic. I want to start by sharing a story of digital currency. Bitcoin was actually not the first digital currency. The first digital currency was called e-gold. It was designed by a medical doctor by the name of Dr. Jackson. In his design, the e-gold was a private international currency fully backed by gold. And it runs on a decentralized platform with a system of smart contracts running on a network of servers to process transactions. That sounds familiar, right? And that was launched in 1996. At its peak, it was the second largest online payment industry, only second to PayPal. It had customer accounts numbered 3.5 million and operated in 165 countries. So what happened to e-gold? In 2005, e-gold was raided by FBI. In 2007, Justice Department indicted Jackson and his colleagues on federal charges of money laundering, conspiracy, and operating an unlicensed money transmitting service. A year later, Jackson pled guilty and was sentenced to 36 months of unsupervised release. And the business e-gold was ordered to revamp their business and to register with federal authority and to apply for state money transmitting licenses. 5 years later, which is the latest I can find on the status, November 2013, Dr. Jackson told Financial Times that he has not been able to obtain all the licenses required in most of the US states. And that was within about weeks of the conviction of Jackson, the sentencing of Jackson was the time when the Bitcoin white paper was published. And the author, or people say the authors of the white paper have to this day chosen to be anonymous. Okay, and that was 2008. Yeah. So fast forward to 2022 when Bitcoin peaked at 60,000-ish. The cryptocurrency has developed into a 3 trillion market. Yeah. And despite of last year, 2022, have the industry has gone through an implosion of Luna, the stablecoin Luna and Terra USD, Terra stablecoin Terra USD. The bankruptcy of Three Arrows Capital, then bankruptcy of FTX, and from peak to trough, like more than 70% drop in the crypto market cap. We're seeing the traditional institutions are continuing to reaffirming their activities, build out plans on the crypto. We see Fidelity's continue to offer crypto tradings to their 401k account. We see BlackRock putting crypto trading on their institutional advisory platforms, Aladdin, allow their advisors to offer to their client. We see Visa, we see MasterCard. So the institution's activity continues. In the meanwhile, as early as recent as last week, right, we're also here, Kraken was fined by SEC and pulling their staking product. And we see Paxo, this is Friday, ordered to stop the issuing stable coins and will serve as a wealth notice. Right? So if we read the crypto Twitter space, it's full of cries of regulation by enforcement. Does not work. And Bloomberg headline a day ago, I quote, US crackdown seeks to push crypto back to the fringe of finance. So it's interesting time to have this topic, right? So Alexa, I want to turn the question to you, right? Maybe you want to let's start hearing your view about why should this industry embrace regulation as opposed to fearing regulations may stifle its development.
Thank you, Jay. I don't remember that Chinese New Year Eve invitation.
It wasn't an invitation, it was spontaneous.
Okay, but this tells you that in this market, memories run very long. So you have to be careful what you say. And with that, let me make some frank disclosures. I'm not with the SFC anymore. So the views that I share with you today are just my views. Now, on regulation, I think at this time, basically everybody agrees that regulation is good for the industry. The question really is, how do you regulate? How do you make sure that you can balance, one, protecting investors appropriately, and two, allowing the industry to continue to grow? Now, I think every regulator and every government will be telling you the same equation. The question is, how do you manage that? That is very difficult. It requires a science and an art. And in fact, I sometimes wonder, in 2008, when Satoshi Nakamoto published his white paper, if the world's regulators were not busy firefighting in the GFC, and instead they had focused their attention on the white paper, whether or not the Bitcoin and crypto story might have been very different. But that's not for us today, that's for historians. Now, looking at the market, I mean the industry, if you ask the average investor today, hey, what are your views of crypto coins? Likely he will tell you, oh, gee, I'm interested. At least I'm curious. But let me tell you, I'm worried. I'm worried about being dragged into a money laundering scam. I don't know if the prices that I see are real or they are manipulated by whoever it is. I don't even know if my platform I can trust, whether they are protecting my assets or they are dipping their hands into it. And of course, I worry that my platform could be hacked. And for traders who keep their coins in their cold wallet, they say that they worry even for that short split moment when they move the coins from the cold wallet into the hot wallet of the exchange. During that very moment, the coin could be hacked and it could be gone. So, I mean, it's very clear that there has been a lot of hype in the industry, a lot of hype of the technology, and the technology has done some very wonderful things for us, for the financial market, for the economy. But at the end of the day, when you come back to Earth, you still have to ask yourself, is this an asset that is a good store of value? And even more importantly, is this an asset that will allow me to continue to accrete, to build value on this asset? And the truth is, the market is not moving forward. The crypto market is stuck, as you said just now. And extreme price volatility, the boom and bust, the absolute degree of distrust. So something needs to be done to the market. The market needs to have regulation so that it can rebuild investor confidence, rebuild market integrity, and therefore it can function as a capital market that efficiently allocates capital to fund the worthy enterprises. And as I said just now, some of the technological breakthroughs that we have seen in the last 10 years are absolutely amazing, and we should continue to encourage that. Now, investors, when they invest in the crypto market, they take risks. They take investment risks. That's fine. It's a calculated risk. But they should not have to take the risk of fraud, the risk of embezzlement, the risk of misinformation. That's not fair for them to take. They should not have to take those risks. So if you look at the US market, for instance, before 1929 crash, the market was basically going through a go-go era, and investors lost tons of money because of scams, because of Ponzi schemes, because of manipulations. So US Congress put in place nationwide laws on securities regulation, established the SEC as the federal regulator, and they brought in a regime that has underpinned strong growth in the market. And today, the US market, it has the deepest pool of capital. It is able to attract the world's largest pool of money. And everybody who participates is protected by a minimal level of protection, in the sense that they know that they can trust the information, they can trust the transparency, and they can trust that the information that they need to assess their risks is fully and timely disclosed to them. So it's very clear what the market needs today is appropriate regulation, fair rules of play, and mandate everyone to be fit and proper, and punish and deter misconduct to restore market confidence, and therefore support innovation.
Thank you. And that's very clear. Crypto requires good regulation, but it requires a balance in between a sufficient regulation and also the necessary flexibility to achieve its promise, especially given a lot of technology issues, a lot of the technology that's emerging has some have little or no comparison to what we've seen historically. Now, Alexa, how would you, as someone who's been in this regulator seat before, the balance between these two things?
Well, as I said earlier, it's not easy. And don't forget, the regulators are trying to regulate it in a rapidly fast-moving or evolving space of products, systems, and technology. And they are in a totally unfamiliar terrain. So they face a steep learning curve. And regulators, whether it's the SEC or the SFC or some of the other regulators, they say, we will adhere to the motto, same business, same risks, same rules. Now that must be correct. But then they may not be a perfect fit for virtual assets and activities to go within the existing regulatory system. So we need to be careful that when we design the rules, they work, they make sense. And two things we have to watch out for. One, we don't create gaps such that investors think that they are protected, but in fact they're not. Until the industry doesn't get completely stymied so that, they get killed. So clearly you need to work together, both the industry and the regulator. They really need to have a good dialogue so that the regulators understand what it is that the industry wants to do. And the industry also needs to understand that, yes, you have a new product, you have exciting technology, it's really cool, but at the end of the day, what is the nature of your transaction? If the nature of your transaction is that you are going to the public to ask for money, then it must be fair that you give the public adequate disclosures so that they know what the risks are, what is this product, what it's supposed to do, and who are you? Why is it that I can trust you? These are things that are minimal for the investors. So you can't just tell the regulator, hey, these are new, and therefore there's no risk because it's computer enabled. So don't worry, you can't do that. So need to talk. And I guess the best thing, given that we are in unfamiliar terrain, the best thing to do is to build out in phases. So the first thing you do is you look at the problem and you figure out what is the biggest problem and you fix it. And then you move on to some of the other bits. So if you look at like what happened with FTX last November, you can see that the center of the whole ecosystem and the question most germane to the current fear and distrust is that the centralized crypto platforms are unregulated and therefore they could be sitting on a huge asymmetry of information. They may not be protecting client assets. So those are key. And that's why you really need to focus on that. And I believe that, these measures are now being taken care of because come June 1st, all the crypto platforms, whether you only trade non-security tokens or you trade security tokens or you trade a hybrid, you will need to get a license under the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing amendment order. So let's call it AMLO. So you need a license under AMLO. And if you also trade securities token, you will also need a license, as you said, type 7. Under the SFO, you need both. And don't worry, you can have the same team, the same systems, because basically, I don't believe that there are many platforms who purely trade non-security tokens. So, it's the same team, same system. But the system, the germane to this system is that the platforms cannot just play monkey with the client asset. They have to establish an associated company incorporated in Hong Kong who does nothing but keep client assets. If it is money, it has to be banked with a bank regulated by the HKMA. And the platform will have to file monthly returns with the regulator so that they know what's going on and where are your client assets. And the regulator can come in for on-site inspections or desktop reviews. And at the end of the year, you will need a third-party reviewer to sign off to say, okay, this platform is compliant. So these things are all there. Now, you may say associated companies still under the control of or under common control with somebody else who controls the platform. That's true, but it's still a big step forward from what you have today, which is the platform can just dip into client assets. The platform can, do whatever it likes, repledge or hypothecate, because under the new regime, one thing that the platforms cannot do is to provide margin financing. So as an investor, you can rest for sure that your assets will not be pooled together with somebody else's and repledged with some bank, and then you will never get to see it. So this is good, but eventually going forward, we will probably, Hong Kong will probably also want to look at other players in the ecosystem. For instance, should you have independent third-party custodians? What about those people who build the wallets? What about those people who just provide lending, crypto lending? So those are things that will come, but I think we need to do it phase by phase. And the first phase, the most important phase is take care of client assets.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So focusing on the platform as a first priority definitely makes a lot of sense. It's important. It's where most of the clients have the first exposure to this asset class. And frankly, it's where the problem has been. So as far as the mission of a regulator goes, especially on the platform, protecting retail, the mama papas has always been on top of everyone's list. And there have been different voices on this topic, both in Hong Kong and internationally. Some would think retail is an essential part of a healthy market. Without retail, you couldn't really call it a market. Others would think at this early stage of nascent industry, why bother taking on such risk with retail? Is this a clear-cut yes or no question to you? How would you draw the boundaries?
I think the regulator's job is to protect investors from fraud, not to protect investors from themselves. So I would personally, I would support opening it to retail, but I would also support putting in some guardrails, at least initially. So I understand that the SFC will very shortly be coming out with a consultation, which will also cover this point. So let's hope, let's wait and see what they have, but let's hope that they will be approaching it in this direction, which is, yes, we should allow retail, but let's have some guardrails. For instance, only products that satisfy certain market cap size, liquidity, volume, or they are on, very transparent and rules-based indices. So maybe to start with, that's the area where platforms could list products for retail. Now, of course, platforms, even under the existing law, platforms will have the function of making sure that their selection of products for listing goes through a very robust process. Ultimately, of course, you should give it back to the investors and the industry. The platforms must be able to decide what is best on their platform, and investors must be able to decide what is best for them. And ultimately, platforms should compete on products, on service, on pricing, and on quality. But that day is not going to be tomorrow. And the regulator will probably need to do massive investor education, but you need to start.
Thank you. So going back to dialogue between industry and the regulators, and moving in phases. So I guess that'll apply to what types of coins are the platform allowed to offer, whether or not, say, Tether is an unregulated stable currency is okay to be offered or not offered. Let me press that further though. What about derivatives? 70% of crypto trading is actually in derivatives. The January 2023 data, this is this past month, where the trading activity actually has been far below where the peak activity has been. Global crypto derivative trading was $2 trillion US. That's about 2 times of total market cap of the crypto industry. Vast majority of that 2 trillion was actually transacted offshore on exchanges like Binance and unregulated exchanges. The regulated exchange, the CME of the world, has only a fraction of that market share. Should platforms be allowed to offer trading on these type of derivatives? And if not to retails, at least to the professional investors?
Right. It's a very good question. Currently, SFC licensed virtual asset platforms, there are only two, but they are not permitted to engage in any offering, trading, or dealing activities in relation to derivatives that have an virtual asset underlying. But that's not an open and shut case, because already the SFC and the Hong Kong MA are allowing certain regulated products to be sold to retail. For instance, if it is a product which is traded on a regulated exchange like the CME, I heard what you say about the CME, but, and also, you know, exchange traded ETFs, whose underlyings are futures-based virtual assets, and the ETFs are regulated, authorized by a regulator, for instance, the SEC. These are already allowed to be sold to retail. And the logic for the regulator, I suppose, is that these are investing in products that are listed on exchanges that are regulated, the rules are clear, they're conventional rules, there's transparency of pricing and information, and very important, there is sharing of information between the regulator and the exchange, or between one exchange and another exchange. That's very important, because that goes to market integrity, manipulation, and so on and so forth. So I hear what you said just now about the bulk of offshore derivatives trading versus the anemic volumes on the regulated exchange. But I believe that the SFC wants to tread very carefully here. Some of their concerns probably include questions like capital requirements, prudential requirements, because the platform manages the trades and also the margin, which is very important. So how do you calibrate capital adequacy for these platforms? And linked to that, of course, is the risk management, because you're talking about assets which can be hugely volatile, and that volatility could be seriously compounded by the leverage. So do they have adequate systems? You know, what are you talking about? So these must be some of the issues on their mind. But then going forward, you think about it, now that we have Hong Kong licensed platforms, and we are probably the first ones to be doing that. And we should really look forward at what can be built to list on the platforms. So platforms and originators should really start engaging with the regulator to tell them what is it that they want to build and why is it good, and have a dialogue. I mean, to start, you could probably do something which is more plain vanilla. For instance, you build derivatives on top of like stable coins or even CBDC, central bank currency. I know it's not particularly exciting, but at least it's a derivative. It's something that you can put on your platform. Again, it's a new product. Or you can wrap green bonds using your blockchain technology. You know, there must be things that you can do, and ultimately, you know, it would be nice to be able to put on Hong Kong platforms derivative products that investors, not just in Hong Kong, but the rest of the world, would want to buy.
Here, exciting opportunity to build a regulated derivatives exchanges here in Hong Kong. Other jurisdictions are trying the same. In fact, that was one of the top priority item for the U.S. crypto advocacy group to move those offshore activities to onshore U.S. And I hear you about regulators' concern on why some of the activities currently happening on these offshore exchanges are worrisome to bring to a regulated exchange and expose to the investor, including the high amount of leverage and the opaqueness of the risk controlling here, right? So it goes back to the dialogue. We're going to leave plenty of time later for questions. I would love to hear, again, dialogue. I want to hear from industry and academics. What are questions you have on your mind? So we can have a candid discussion over here. So we've spent quite a bit of time so far exploring the platforms and how regulations apply to the platforms, and try to strike out a balance between regulating, protecting the investor, protecting the participant of the market, and as well as like leaving enough flexibility for the industry to continue to develop. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's look at other players of this nascent industry. I want to start with builders. Builders in this new industry. It's a group of individuals. Some of them are developers, but builders are not just about developers. They can be a community manager within the Discord group. They can be early adapters and contributing ideas. This is a group of people. It's critical for any country, for any city who wants to build itself into an eco-center of this new economy to attract, to make the environment attractive for them to want to live in, to be headquartered in here. What's the number one issue all the builders on top of their mind is, as the industry said, wind token. So this goes to the important question of tokenization, and how to issue token. How will Hong Kong's new regulatory regime impact these builders and the company, the firms who are out there at different stage of the innovation of the product and thinking about the wind token issue?
Interesting question. Now, the new regime is about platforms. It's not about tokens or offering tokens. If you offer tokens or whatever you choose to call it, you can call it avatar, you can call it token, you can call it your AI, whatever. But if you're offering them to the public, the issue is you need to figure out whether your activity would fall within the Securities and Futures Ordinance. Let's call it the SFO. Because if it does, the law applies, you have to comply with the requirements. And if you are not offering to the public, you're just doing it among a few friends, or you just offer to professional investors, then the law regarding public offerings doesn't apply to you. But then, because you have an exemption, the exemption is either it's professional investor or is a private offering. But of course, you need to be very, very careful what is private. And people typically keep it to confine it to a very small number of people who cannot send the invitation to someone else. And private capital raising has been a major capital sourcing avenue in any capital market, Hong Kong included. But then I understand that when you're talking about DeFi, you're talking about systems, you're talking about network. And the cool thing about it is the network and how wide the network is. And therefore, you probably would be looking at a wider distribution, wider offering, and you would likely fall within the securities the SFO, and you have to comply. Now, I've heard a lot of noises like, but this is different. I mean, it may be different because it's technology enabled. It's not called share. It's called an avatar, whatever it is. But you look at the traditional financial market. Entrepreneurs come to market to raise capital. They come with good disclosures on who they are, what their project is, how they're going to make money, what is the governance structure, why you can entrust your money with them, and what are the risks. They come with all these things. So why is it that just because this thing is new, is technology enabled, but it's nevertheless still an invitation for people to put money in with the incentive that they could make money in return? Why is it different? Why is it that the public to whom you approach should not be given a similar level of disclosures? You notice I say similar level. I didn't say similar, because I think we all need to recognize that we are talking about products that are very different. And therefore, there's no intuitive fit between these activities that we see now and the traditional activities that the regulator has been regulating. But the nature of the transaction is raising money from the public. So you need to focus on that and build out disclosures that are appropriate and that would provide the public with the same level of information to enable them to make an informed decision. So the regime as it is doesn't touch on public offering, and you will have to refer back to the SFO.
So I hear you. The initial regulatory framework is not going to rush to create new rules on token issuance. It's going to focus on the trading of the tokens, particularly the trading of the tokens, particularly focus on the platforms where it's that acts as a conduit for the investor capital, be it retail or professional investors to the asset class. And for industry players, for firms who are looking at or thinking about token issue, the same business, same risk, same rules apply. And it's upon the industry player themselves to consider what exactly is the token activity. If it looks like fundraising, if it feels like a fundraising, it is probably a fundraising. Therefore, should be fit into the existing rules under SFO. There are plenty of exemptions under the SFO, for example, private offering. If I get my friends to invest in my whatever project, that's not on SFO. But if I'm issuing, if I'm doing a fundraising activity, whatever name I use it in, for public, that is probably under SFO. And there are other activities, maybe could be like Asia Mile type of loyalty points, or could be utility tokens as a way of incentivizing users to participate in activity. Some of those, at the current stage, is up to the player themselves to assess what kind of risk I'm actually undertaking, or what's the actual activity. What about other areas of a crypto economy? Things that are push a little bit, things are a little bit has little or no direct counterparts in the traditional finance or traditional economy. For example, decentralized financing, DeFi yield farming, automated market making. We have a smart contract, and you and I, every one of us individually can just sign up and collect, and we can be the market maker. And a few of us can pull our money together and act as a group to be the market maker. And staking, and that's what's Kraken staking. Each of us can individually stake. I can then go raise a pool of capital and go and offer staking as a service to my client. That's what Kraken was doing. They seem to be getting in trouble in there. And another one I like is lending against the JPEGs. A collection of monkey JPEGs worth a lot of money, and if some of the investors are willing to lend against it, can offer that as a service. Alexa, what advice would you give to the different builders for creating innovative products. Some of the products we don't even know has can exist today because technology is so new. And also to the intermediaries who are working honestly to channel the capitals to these investors. What advice would you give to these people?
It's not that we don't have rules out there. We have rules. It's just that this thing is so different from what we are used to seeing that we have to figure out how this fits into the rules. Right. So, for instance, let's talk about yield farming. So, an intermediary tells investors, if you put your coins in here with me, we lock it up, I can use them to provide a yield which is much more attractive than what you get from the banks. And are you in or not? Yeah, I'm in, of course. You're talking a yield of 15%, 18%, of course I'm in. Now, I mean, what you're doing, this may be, you may be talking about tokens, and maybe the purpose is that you could go stake them, which is that you take those tokens and you put them on a blockchain and you use the tokens to validate transactions on the blockchain. And as a result, you earn more tokens and then you distribute the tokens. So it sounds like a fun thing to do. And while your tokens are there doing nothing, you earn a little extra. So why not? But then the issue is this something that constitutes an offering of securities? Now, securities, let's not go into the US situation because one, I'm not an expert on US securities law, and two, we don't really have all the facts. But let's take that simplistic model that I just described, which is what you were alluding to, and let's test it against the SFO. Securities under the SFO is very widely defined. Why? Precisely because it has to be scalable in the sense that the market continues to develop. So what you see today as a share, tomorrow may be something very different, but the nature of your right in this thing in which you hold a share, whatever you call it, is the same. Right? So securities is widely defined. It includes not just securities that you and I know, the shares. It also includes collective investment schemes. It includes regulated investment agreements, and it also includes structured products. So let's have a look at collective investment scheme. It is very widely defined. And in fact, I'm sure many of you have heard of the US Howey test, which is what the US courts laid down as the test they use for deciding whether or not something or an agreement is an investment agreement, and therefore it needs to be registered. Our definition is similar to that. So you need an arrangement in respect of capital, in respect of property, and the property can be any asset. So clearly tokens is property. Arrangement can be agreement, can be an understanding, can be almost anything. So an arrangement in respect of property in which you participate, but you do not have day-to-day control over the management of that property. Day-to-day control. So even though you have the right to direct or to give advice on how to manage, is not enough. You have to have day-to-day control. So if you test it against the DAO, chances are, once they have put that thing into the DAO, although it is a smart contract, it's autonomous, and everybody on the DAO makes decisions, but probably you do not have day-to-day control of the management. You have the right to make certain decisions. So anyway, so you put property in, you don't have the right to day-to-day control, and someone else manages the property, or the property is managed by that someone else who is the arranger. And either your property is pooled and the profits are pooled, or that property is managed by that someone else. So either case, and the purpose or effect of that whole arrangement is that you stand to gain some economic benefit from the arrangement. So you test that against your the little story, the little scenario that we just described. You probably fall within the CIS definition. The sky doesn't fall down on you just because you fall within the definition. It just means that you will have to get authorization before you offer to the public. And authorization requires you to come forward with good disclosures. So all the ingredients that I talked about just now, but of course, you are not talking about the typical disclosures when you're talking about a company. You're talking about DAO. So you need to adjust your disclosures according to that. So it's not that the regulator or the legislature has to make new rules. It's just that you have to work out what are the disclosures appropriate for this kind of activity that would give investors the right amount of information. Right, so I hope that's clear.
Thank you. That's, I suppose, as clear as it can get. So it goes back to what we covered, that industry is at a junction where industry actually needs regulation. Industry would welcome regulation, because without regulation, where we have to fall back is regulating by enforcement, where I would say most industry player would say they much prefer a balanced regulation that's spelled out what can and cannot do, as opposed to subject the industry to the risk of seemingly random enforcement actions and regulate through enforcement actions. And Alexa, you laid out a path where industry can work closely with the regulator. I think particularly here in Hong Kong, where we have a tradition and we have a history of being able to have dialogues with the regulator, taking a phased approach, and would require some patience on industry side, particularly if we're working on some of the products that the regulators just has never seen before. At the same time, apply the principle of same business, same risk, same rules, and we have opportunity to build Hong Kong into the center of the virtual asset in a regulated, a healthy kind of way. At this junction, I want to open for questions. Like anything that have in mind, we can discuss.
Well, currently, the broker dealers regulated by the SFC, they also keep custody of client assets. The requirements are that they have to ring fence those assets. They should be segregated, cannot be commingled. And by and large, that has worked. Now, of course, you have the odd embezzlement by staff, that kind of thing. But by and large, it has worked because the SFC has backed up that honest regime with inspections, both on-site and also desk review. And I believe the situation is somewhat similar in the US. Now, for custodians, I believe that right now, they are not regulated as custodians as such. The issue with virtual assets is that you feel a little more uncomfortable because they are virtual. And then you hear these things about hacking and disappearance. You forget your PIN, you're dead, that kind of thing. So I guess those are the issues. But I believe that we need to take this a step at a time. So right now, the regulator has basically built a regime in terms of client asset protection, which is similar to the existing regime with broker dealers. So going forward, do we need more? This is probably something that everyone should be thinking about and looking at. And it's not just the custodians. What about the wallet builders, those who keep the wallets, right? And so, you have a whole host of other players in the ecosystem. And the more sophisticated the system, the better off everybody is. So, this is, as I said, we need to build out in phases. Yes.
What I find out is that regulators have already gone to that. They are still trying to adapt their whole processes and to a new paradigm figure out how this new mechanism of this but what idea of these like institutionalization of these not like rules in the most to be one to communicate things that are down to regardless of how many bars you engage in and here's like the whole idea is to think in the investors. You might say one set of we do not like the system, cash is from this unjust privileges of these people what already they are buying to the destiny of those who they want to figure out access to that. One of these regulations they might, perhaps, restrict or prohibit the right of another SPS or Alameda. Within, we may go into the unified radical to realize that we did not want LSPS Alameda in the first place. We did not consider these actually a part of our ecosystem. So you are perfectly happy with SPS. You want all these finance. If there's anyone else you want to talk to that, you have to come down to the four tenants of the system. So I think that
Personally, as someone in the DeFi space and taking the sort of challenges of perhaps representing the DeFi space industry, I think the role of regulators now should not be to keep on adapting their same processes of, what they think has been working in the credit book in the banking system, because mandating, mandating of disclosure or regulating or restricting or vetting people. And I think the main task of regulators going forward will be to incentivize, encourage, and promote honesty investment, to basically guide people who they think are more transparent, who they think have the best processes and big work to take, rather than trying to play the role of nanny and sort of
Let me comment on that before I pass to you, Alexa. I hear you loud and clear. The original design of the digital currency actually didn't start from Bitcoin. It goes all the way back to e-gold. Was a group of individuals recognizing to say there's a deficiency in how money is ran today. What if we can design a system where money is not controlled by individual central banks? We have a brand new system. And as we were discussing, the problem that we've had so far is actually not with those decentralized systems. The problem so far we've had are the platforms, the centralized platforms, is where I see, going back to our discussions earlier, in terms of regulatory priority, it's a complex topic. It's a new industry that we take a phased approach and we see where the problem has been and tackle on that first. That's my take on that. Alexa, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you. Actually, your views, they're interesting, but it's not the first time I hear it. There are many who have advocated that view. And I can understand, I can see where you guys are coming from and, what's on your mind. Now, ideally, it should always be caveat emptor, and people should be left to protect their own space, and they should be free to innovate and, work on whatever it is that interests them. But when this personal interest thing crosses with what is, if you could call, a larger public interest, then caveat emptor may not always work, because just as you were pointing out, you don't like the likes of FTX and Alameda. I don't think anybody does. But you do need a minimal underpinning of regulation to make sure that we don't have any more FTXs and Alamedas. And that's where the law comes in. So we can't, I guess we live in society, so there is a consensual contract, and we can't just say, oh, everybody's free to do what he likes. Yes, up to a point. And I think you're right. The regulators are catching up, and it's very hard to catch up because this is so new. And as I said, I've always wondered if the regulators started focusing on the white paper in 2008, I don't know what would be the story today, but so it is catching up, but this is a space that it is in the larger public good that we should put a minimum substratum of rules so that there is trust, because you need the trust. Even for DeFi, for completely decentralized, you still need a minimal degree of trust, right? So where's that going to come from? You need something to help you. And therefore, this is where regulation comes in. I don't think regulation should be seen as something that impedes It should be seen as something that helps. And it helps because it helps weed out the bad elements. And I mean, the distinction between institutional, professional, and retail investors may be a little arbitrary, but the gist of it is you come to the larger public for money, you owe a duty to the larger public to explain. I think that's the gist of the issue.
Also, just want to add one more thing about, Alexa, what you mentioned earlier in the beginning part of the talk about avoiding the gap between what investors think they're protected versus what they're actually protected. So my interpretation to that is that if let's say a DeFi protocol, let's say Hong Kong's regulator put a stamp approval on it by giving a license, the public would then perceive there's a level of trust in there. But how would what work a regulator actually need to do to be able to provide that trust? It's a quite challenging question. In fact, Alex, I walked you through, and thank you very much. You're the first regulator I had the pleasure of walking through how to set up a wallet. Right? I question globally how many regulators actually have done that themselves. Well, they are the ones being tasked with coming up with regulations for that.
Thank you both for a very interesting discussion, very thought-provoking. I actually quite appreciate the point that has already been addressed by Jay, because you raised a very interesting and point about the regulatory focus is actually on centralized platform. So that is actually the starting point of my discussion. My understanding is Hong Kong's regulatory regime has developed at two different stages. The first stage is on virtual asset trading platform. They could already opt in regulation to subject themselves to the licensing system. And these kind of asset trading platforms are those ones that involve asset managers that either manage or invest in securities. So that was the first stage of development until recently, LATCO on the 7th of December last year closed a regulatory gap to cover the non-securities service providers. As a result, they will be subject to the revision of the AML-CFT ordinance, which will take effect in June this year. And as a result of the passing of the AML-CFT revision ordinance, the regulatory gap has been closed. So now, whether they are security-based or non-security-based, they will be subject, the centralized platforms will be subject to the licensing regime. My question to either one of you is, what's the rationale for the opt-in regulation in the first stage for virtual asset trading platform? Thank you.
Well, my guess is that the SFC only has authority if you are talking about securities. Now, there are some tokens which are not securities. And if a platform only trades non-security tokens, the SFC has no basis to regulate. Even if the platform says, oh, please give me a license, the SFC cannot, because it will be ultra-virus. So the opt-in is that, okay, if you want a license from us and you only do non-security, maybe you do one security token. And therefore, by law, you will have to license. So it is opt-in the sense that you choose to add one security token to your stable, and therefore you get a license. And I guess for platforms, the attraction is that they are now licensed, and therefore they can promote themselves as a SFC licensed platform, which will kind of give them a brand. But with MLAW, is now full legislation which backs the SFC in having the authority to give a license, and whether you are security or non-security, so long as you do tokens, I mean, you do virtual assets, you fall within it, as my guess.
Yes, I would echo that. And it's conveying a level of trust. Being licensed would give the clients, the firm that is approaching, the assurance that we're satisfying some minimal level in order to maintain that SFC license. The commercial calculation, frankly, has not been in favor of opting in until recently. I see, I see Ken sitting there. We'll probably have stories to share. Because so far the licensing has been the first phase of licensing has been too restricted, so that when you balance between I love the brand, I love the ability to access my clients from many different channels versus what am I not allowed to do because I'm a licensing so far has not been favorable. I think speaking for industry, we're very looking forward to the new regulatory regime to come out that strikes the well balance.
We have a question there.
One question, please. Yeah.
And then the gentleman behind you, after you.
Many of the blockchains have the ability to allow wallets or tokens to be frozen or blacklisted. This is not widely known and is very rarely used. There are no laws or regulations on freezing a wallet on the blockchain in the event of fraud. And the process is if assets in a wallet are determined to be stolen, then they can be destroyed and new tokens issued. Now, I know my colleague over here will oppose this ability to freeze a wallet on the blockchain, but why is there no regulation in Hong Kong or elsewhere? Is the SFC going to make such rules and processes to freeze assets on the blockchain?
To be honest, I really don't know how to answer that question.
Okay.
I guess you do have the authority to freeze assets. The issue is,
who has authority?
I mean, if they are securities and they are being stolen, then, I mean, if you are talking about assets being stolen, then clearly the police have authority. But if they are securities and it is a market player, somebody licensed by the SFC who has stolen it, then the SFC would have authority, but typically they would probably work together with the police.
I don't believe the authority is formalized in law or regulation.
My observation so far has been that the process of freezing different wallets or even go to protocols has been so far part of the existing criminal code. So that if for example, if a wallet was involved with a ransom incident or deemed inappropriate in a KYC investigation, the authority would be passed through that part of the criminal ordinance. I don't know the right way to say it.
Yeah. The criminal ordinance, the crimes ordinance.
The crime ordinance.
Yeah.
That's my understanding
Yeah.
so far. I think your question is that since crypto is is different, does it make sense to have a separate body of regulation just to cover this aspect of it?
Yes.
Checking in the back here.
If I may go back to the prior conversation on licensing the regulation platform here in Hong Kong. Under the regulation, will the platform be allowed to keep the client assets instead of data down, or are they keep it just like open? I'm just curious about how are you to the license and protecting those assets from those.
Okay, thank you for that question. Under the current arrangement with the platforms that have opted in, they are required, no, let's go straight to AMLO. So under AMLO, which will be a license that all platforms can get or will need to get, whether or not you trade securities or non-securities. You have to set up an associated company, which is a Hong Kong incorporated company. And that company's sole purpose in life is to keep your client assets. And the company cannot do anything else, cannot do margin financing, cannot do lending, cannot do its own trades. It just keeps the client assets. And the SFC has power over inspection of the company, of its records. And every month when the platform files an account with the SFC, it will have to include information on the associated company. And money that is held by the associated company must be deposited with a Hong Kong regulated bank. So a bank regulated by the HKMA. That's because we have seen before that, oh, the money is in Bahamas, so I don't know what to do with it. So that should take care of it. Now, the issue, of course, is, hey, this is only an associated company. It's not an independent third party, right? So either the platform controls the company or the platform and the company are under common control by a member of the group. And therefore, technically, there could still be problems. That's true. But at least you are way better off than the FTX situation, or for that matter, a number of the other platforms. Because one, the money is because it is in a separate company, so you cannot simply just easily dip into it. And you cannot just move it to your friend or your friendly broker who you want to do a trade for. You want them to do a trade, who you want to do a trade for them, right? So that's the situation now, or under the new AMLO regime. Going forward, should they require independent third-party custodians? And I understand that there are some banks that are interested in doing custodian, in providing custodian service. That's probably something that needs to be looked at. I believe there are rules requiring something like 95 or 98% of your client crypto to be held in cold wallet. There are rules on that. I can't go into details because I don't have the details, but it's not like it's all there and anything can happen to it.
These are global issues to discuss, and obviously different jurisdictions have different experience with these new types of discussions. So I'm wondering if either speaker is aware of efforts being made to collaborate with governments of other countries, not least of which would be the PRC itself, to harmonize or consistent these types of regulations all over the world.
It's a very good question. You're right, because these assets are borderless. There are a number of international organizations of which Hong Kong is a member. Like, for instance, the AIIFL, the International Association of Securities Regulators, Basel, the banking regulators, and then the financial market infrastructure the payment system. So there are a number of these institutions that the SFC, the Hong Kong MA, and the other regulators in Hong Kong belong to. And I am sure, well, in fact, I shouldn't say I'm sure, I know it for a fact that these organizations are all looking at the issues or some of the issues, like for instance, FSB is looking at it from a systemic, global financial systemic point of view. And so, you know, they will be coordinating, and clearly they have to coordinate.
Ken?
Okay, for those of you who don't know, Ken is the operator of Hong Kong's first SFC licensed crypto platform. Anyway, thanks for that question. I think you were talking about, hey, this is a very important piece. Investors are willing to take the risk and still go to those platforms, even though they're not regulated. So what are we doing? And when are we going to have our first regulated futures exchange? Ken, we don't need, we can if you guys want to, but we don't need to set up another regulated futures exchange. Your platform can very well offer futures, right? Hopefully the day will come and you can do that. We're talking about how and where to start. So that conversation, that comment that you made, I hope you have shared with the SFC. Have you? You should, because I think they are willing to listen. And you start somewhere, you start building products. It may not appear particularly interesting to you, but clearly, there will be interest and you should get started. And you should also look at it from the regulator's angle. What is it that they worry about? They worry about capital adequacy. They worry about how to risk manage it's a dynamic risk management of your margin book. How do you do that? How can you give comfort that, don't worry, it's fine. Leave it to me. How can you give that comfort? So think along those lines. I hope you find that helpful.
With time for one more question. Last question, please.
I'm sorry, what?
Recognize the green belt.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Notice that they do have the custodian and the platform provider separated. And at the same time, you just mentioned that the custodian under the tokenized assets should be taken different from their traditional role as a custodian. So I was wondering, like, if it should be different, and then what do you think they should be? Like it should be different in what way?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your question. Can you repeat?
Yeah, it's like I think you mentioned earlier, the custodian in the digital assets or tokenized assets should be treated differently than their traditional role as custodian.
No, I didn't say that. What I meant was, there are some traditional custodians who are also interested in providing custodial services in the virtual asset space. Now, going forward, is this something that Hong Kong should look at? Maybe do the custodians need to be regulated, bearing in mind that right now they are not? So these are issues to look at.
Okay, last question.
Thank you.
Mhm. Self-regulatory, yeah. You probably want to talk to HKMA. Right. I'm sorry? It doesn't matter, you don't know the answer. You have to explore. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, time's up. Thank you very much. And I'm quite excited to hear, to see everyone sitting here. on this beautiful day, talking about crypto regulation. We see issues, but what I'm seeing is everyone here is trying to work together to solve the problem. I hope to see the Bloomberg headline, instead of saying U.S. crackdown to push crypto back to fringe of finance, will say Hong Kong industry working with regulators to develop into crypto center. Thank you very much.